Sarah's heart stopped when she received the letter from the homeowners association. They were banning her from renting her own property. No explanation, no warning. But it wasn't just a mistake. She realized she had become a pawn in a ruthless game. What came next shocked even those who thought they controlled her. But let's start from the beginning. It was just another Tuesday morning when Sarah Thompson opened her mailbox, expecting nothing more than the usual bills and flyers. But what she found inside made her stomach drop. The envelope, emblazoned with the Homeowners Association, HOA logo, had a weight to it. A weight that spoke of something serious, something far beyond the mundane correspondence she was used to. As a single mother juggling a demanding career and the ever-growing costs of her son's college tuition, Sarah had made the decision to rent out the guest house on her property. It seemed like the perfect solution to ease the financial strain. The extra income would help cover the bills, keep her afloat, and allow her to focus on the future without constantly stressing about money. But this letter, this unexpected blow, shattered that hope. The HOA informed her that, according to their rules, her property was ineligible for rental. The words on the paper felt like a punch to her gut. Sarah had read the rules before. She knew the restrictions were there, but they had never been enforced in her neighborhood. Other homes, just down the block, had been rented out for years without issue. Why now? Why her? She scanned the letter again, reading each line more slowly, hoping to find some sort of mistake, some small loophole that could reverse the decision. But no, there was no mistake, no oversight, just an abrupt, unforgiving line in the sand that made it clear she didn't belong. The HOA didn't care about her circumstances, her struggle, her dreams of financial freedom. She was nothing more than an inconvenience to them, an exception to their perfect rules. The weight of it all pressed down on her chest, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. She wasn't just angry. She was crushed. This wasn't just about a guest house. This was about her right to thrive, to make choices for herself and her family. And the message was clear. The system wasn't built for people like her. As Sarah sat at her kitchen table, staring at the letter in disbelief, she couldn't help but dig deeper. Something didn't sit right with her, something she couldn't quite place. The rules were clear enough. She had checked and double-checked the HOA guidelines before deciding to rent out the guest house. But this wasn't about rules. This wasn't about any clear violation. It was about power. And she was beginning to see how ruthlessly it was wielded. Sarah spent the next several days combing through the HOA's past decisions. The more she uncovered, the more her frustration boiled over. It wasn't just the letter. It wasn't just the sudden enforcement of a rule she thought had been ignored for years. What made her blood run cold was the realization that this decision wasn't based on any objective reasoning. It was personal. The HOA wasn't enforcing the rules fairly. It was selectively applying them. She discovered that a few of the wealthier residents had been allowed to rent out their properties without consequence. The restrictions had been bent or outright ignored in their cases. Why? Because they had the right connections. Because they could afford to sway the very system that was supposed to protect the community. And here she was, just an ordinary single mother trying to make ends meet, being punished for the same thing, but with none of the privileges that the wealthy enjoyed. Every email Sarah sent asking for clarification went unanswered. She reached out to the HOA, hoping for some explanation, for some shred of reason. But nothing. The silence was deafening. The more she thought about it, the more she realized. In her community, the voices that mattered were the ones that had power, the ones that had money. Everyone else, people like her, were just there to pay their dues and stay out of the way. Sarah felt the sting of betrayal deep in her chest. The system was rigged. It wasn't about fairness. It wasn't about equality. It was a game, and she was just a pawn. Power and privilege were the only currencies that mattered. And as she sat there, helpless and seething with anger, she realized she was never going to win this battle, not by playing by the rules. Fueled by a mix of searing rage and an overwhelming sense of desperation, Sarah's next steps were driven by an urgency she had never felt before. She knew she couldn't just sit back and let the HOA win, not after everything they had put her through. The stakes were no longer just about her rental income. It was something deeper now. Her dignity, her right to stand up for herself. She had no choice but to fight back. With determination, Sarah threw herself into research. She spent sleepless nights poring over the HOA's regulations, carefully studying every line, every loophole, every potential crack she could exploit. The rules seemed so ironclad at first, so unyielding, but she wasn't about to let that stop her. She read case laws, scrutinized precedents, and even began reaching out to lawyers for advice. It felt like she was diving into an abyss of legal jargon, but each new piece of information she uncovered pushed her forward. She refused to let this system crush her without a fight. Days turned into weeks, and her frustration began to mix with a growing sense of hope. She was getting closer. Then, one evening, as she sifted through another stack of paperwork, something caught her eye. An obscure clause buried deep within the HOA's bylaws. Her heart raced as she read it over and over again. It was a provision that exempted properties from rental restrictions if the owner could prove financial hardship. She paused, stunned by the realization. She had unknowingly qualified. This was the key. This was her chance. The discovery ignited a fire inside her. It wasn't just about the extra income anymore. It was about fighting back against a system that had tried to crush her. Armed with this newfound knowledge, Sarah marched straight to a local lawyer's office. She explained her case, her voice steady but brimming with resolve. This wasn't just a legal battle. It had become a fight for justice. Sarah wasn't just challenging the HOA's decision anymore. She was taking on the hypocrisy that had been eating away at her community. As she left the lawyer's office, a sense of purpose settled over her. It wasn't just about the money now. It was about proving that one person could make a difference, even against an unfair system. She was ready. With the hidden clause in her hands, Sarah felt a surge of power. It was time to take action. She wasn't going to let the HOA intimidate her anymore. She requested an immediate meeting with the board, determined to face them head-on. The moment she walked into the room, she could feel the tension. They had no idea what she was armed with. The board tried to brush her off, their demeanor cold and dismissive, but Sarah stood her ground. She wasn't just a woman seeking answers anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with. As she began presenting the clause buried deep in their bylaws, the board's confident expressions faltered. Their eyes widened, and a noticeable shift in the room occurred. She had caught them. Sarah's voice was steady, her every word precise, as she laid out the facts. She wasn't just challenging a rule, she was exposing their hypocrisy. The board members exchanged glances, some even shifting uneasily in their chairs. They had underestimated her. Weeks of tense negotiations followed, with the HOA attempting to dismiss her findings and delay the process. But Sarah refused to back down. She pushed, every letter, every phone call, every conversation filled with the weight of her discovery. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the HOA board grudgingly reversed its decision. Sarah could rent out her property. The victory was sweet, not because of the money, but because she had stood up to a corrupt system and won. She had refused to be silenced, to be ignored. She wasn't just another victim in a broken system. She was a warrior, and her fight had changed everything.